another episode of the Cultivate and Keep podcast. I'm Corey, here with Jeremy, and we also have a special guest on today, which you've already seen the title, but I will keep it a secret here for now. Just a really quick reminder that we've built out our cultivateandkeep.com/favorites page with all of our favorite books, websites, podcasts, resources for you. So go ahead and check it out there. You can find it in the notes. We have many more guests upcoming in the podcast series that we're doing, just looping in more people. If you have any suggestions or comments or questions for us, please let us know, and you can find us. You can email us at cultivateandkeep.com or find us on social media. I think that's it.
Well, also want to say, if you guys have contact with Tim Tebow, let us know, because we want him.
LT, if you're listening,
LT, you too.
What you waiting for, dude? Let's get it going.
But tonight we have the one and only Nathan Cornett.
Nathan, welcome.
Welcome, Nate.
Thank you very much. I'm excited and nervous to be here.
Nervous?
Wow.
Well, I mean, this is like podcast. This is
big
like
time, huh?
This is a big deal.
I mean, yeah. It's true.
And everything that you say is permanently recorded forever.
That is true, actually.
So be careful, because we don't edit. So
we don't edit, and we plan on having this podcast up for years and decades and centuries. So
I have to be very, very cautious.
Be very
cautious.
Tread lightly, my friend.
Yeah. Especially when you're sitting here with your brother-in-law.
Exactly.
Get you in trouble.
Yes. So
dynamic.
Nathan is my brother-in-law. He married my sister Joanna, my oldest sister.
And wisest.
And
most beautiful.
Ooh, careful, because I think my sister Jenny was
already shots fired. Be careful, Nathan. You've got a long ways to go.
Normally I fire the shots, so...
Well, she's my wife, so,
that's true.
You know.
That's true.
I'm pretty impressed with her, personally.
Yeah.
Good,
cool. Well, Nathan, welcome. Excited to have you. Like I said, he's my brother-in-law. And kind of like the previous formats we followed, we want to ask him a few questions kind of about his life, how he came to know the Lord, and kind of what he's up to now. So why don't you start with telling us about your family, tell us how you grew up. Tell us about that.
What was Nathan the kid like?
The kid.
Was he weird? Was
when
he
he
cool?
had hair?
Yeah, Nathan with hair.
Well, I was significantly more obnoxious than I am now, if you can believe that.
Really
wow.
hard. Yeah.
Corey's like...
Already
That's hard
just
to believe.
Astonished, mind blown.
I grew up in a great home, good mom and dad. Have a brother and a sister. We were raised in a Christian home. We went to church together most Sundays. And it was pretty basic upbringing, right? Pretty typical America. My parents are still married, still love each other, which is a borderline miracle in our culture. But I really am grateful for their influence in my life. And, the truth is, without, my mom's influence in my life, I probably wouldn't be walking with Jesus. And so I'm really thankful for my mom's prayers and for her encouragement over the years. I really believe that it's because of her that I'm following Jesus now, in large part. I mean, there's a lot of factors, which we can get into it as we go on. But, so that's me as a kid. Red hair, curly hair. If you see my daughter, she's got huge red curly hair. That's pretty much how my hair looked when I was her age. And then I lost it all. So now I have no hair. And people are like, where does she get the red hair from? Like, from me. Well, and you. I mean, you it's on both sides of the family. But I guess they say, where does she get the curls from? And I say, that came from me. And they look at my head and go, really? No, I used to have curls.
And you grew up here in East County, San Diego.
Yeah.
So
Raised in La Mesa. I was actually born in St. Louis, Missouri, but moved here to San Diego when I was 2.
Okay.
And so thank you, Dad, for doing that for us. And I am, raised in La Mesa and El Cajon area, and been here my whole life.
Okay. And so growing up, you mentioned kind of briefly in passing that you attribute a lot of sort of your walk with God and your faith today to your mom. So what was kind of like the turning point? And did you experience any sort of like life-changing moment, or was it just kind of over time? Like, tell us about how you sort of came to the Lord and gave your life to him.
Well, it's funny because, when you get older, you start wondering how many thoughts were your thoughts versus how many were pictures that your parents showed you and you think you remember. But I have pretty clear memories of accepting Christ outside of a Baptist church in Lemon Grove. We went to a church, I think it's called Lemon Grove Baptist Church, and I have pretty clear memories of accepting Christ right after, I guess it was probably a Sunday morning service, just saying I want to follow Jesus. And
And you were how old?
I think 3 or 4.
Oh, okay. Well,
Yeah, so I that's my memory of how it went down.
yeah.
So very young, right? Very young age. And in fact, a friend of our family's, a woman named Donna McCoy, just commented on Facebook when I was on vacation saying, "Hey, I just sent you something, to your office." And it was really cool because I got it, and it was a letter that I had written when I was 7 years old. I wanted to get baptized. We were going to Elk Cone Vineyard at the time, and they said, if you want to get baptized, you have to write a letter saying why you want to get baptized. And so I did. And I remember writing this letter, dude. And I remember it being like this deep theological explanation, this exegesis of my faith.
Do you have
Like one day this is going to be in the Bible and people are going to be talking about it for centuries. And
yeah, like that kind of a thing, right? 7-year-old mind. And I just remember it being like my manifesto for why I needed to be baptized. And they accepted it and said, okay, you can get baptized. I was so stoked. I even remember the night of the baptism. It was at La Jolla Shores. The tide came up so high, it came all the way up to the concrete wall. We had to move all of our stuff. And I remember it so vividly getting baptized. And 7 years old, right? I have real clear memories of that. And she just mailed me that letter. And it's
no way.
I want to be baptized. I love Jesus. I want to follow Jesus. Thank you.
Wow, creative, Nathan.
I misspelled my name, Nahtan,
Oh, sorry.
which I was
Doesn't
like,
count.
what?
That's funny.
So my 5-year-old daughter knows how to spell her name correctly, but I couldn't pull that off. So she's smarter than me, thank goodness.
Got that from Joanna.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. I can make jokes, but this is permanent, so we're gonna.
It's a bummer she
not
got
say
your
anything
looks,
about
though. I know. It's a bummer. Bang. Got
Hey,
you,
There's a
Nate.
shot fired. Dang.
I was gonna say that, but I didn't want to say that. I was like, "Oh, my poor little girl looks exactly like me." But at least she's smart like her mom, so that's
Yeah.
good.
No.
She's got that going for her. So that's how I came to know Jesus, and that whole process was really good. It was kind of real natural. My whole life has been wrapped up in following God, and that's the truth.
Did you ever have a point of falling away? And we've talked a little bit about you kind of finding your way. So tell us about that.
Sure. Yeah, I think there's there's been several times where I feel like I've walked away from God. It's interesting because I was thinking about this a lot recently. I don't really know why, but I don't think that it was until I came to Foothills, my church, and there's a whole backstory that I'm not going to get into, but basically I had a conversation with Mark Hoffman, which for me was mind-blowing, that I would sit down with a senior pastor, because that was just didn't happen at the church I was at or my
And how
experience.
old were you?
I guess I was probably about 21, somewhere right in there. And 20, 21, somewhere right in there. And he really fathered me. And I don't know how to explain it other than to say he is a spiritual father to me, and he has taken a role of being a spiritual father that I greatly appreciate and respect. And I don't think I believe I had a very real faith in God before that point, but I don't think I had ever been a disciple of Jesus until that point. And that's kind of a funny thing, but I'll give you an example. I'm 18 years old, and I'm an intern in a church, and I'm going to TJ on Friday night and getting drunk, right? And then I'm at church Sunday morning leading worship. And I didn't think there was anything wrong with that. That's just totally fine. And in hindsight,
you really didn't think anything was wrong with that?
No, didn't even cross my mind as being a problem. And I think that's why I say that I don't know that I was actually a disciple of Jesus. Did I have a saving knowledge of who Christ was, and do I believe that Jesus loved me and I knew that stuff? Absolutely, there's no question. If I had died when I was 18, I believe I would have gone to heaven. But actually following Jesus and being a disciple of Jesus, I don't think really started until I started going to Foothills. And that's I think that's kind of hard for me to come to grips with, because I was raised in a Christian home, right? Been a Christian not my whole life, because you have to accept Christ, but I was raised in this environment. But it wasn't until Mark sat me down and really laid out what it means to follow Jesus. And then through a process of serving and being mentored and serving and being mentored and kind of trial and error, I was really raised on how to follow Christ. And I think that was a turning point, I think, for me in terms of I'm a disciple of Jesus. And I've had plenty of times where I've messed up, I've failed, but I always knew this is part of being a disciple. And repent, turn, do something different. I don't think I really got that until I was fathered, right, in the faith. And a lot of that I attribute to Mark Hoffman, but there was other men as well. Don Bastrom was a huge had a huge impact on my life in terms of teaching me how to be a disciple of Jesus.
Did you know that was happening, like as it was happening, where, Mark takes a new role in your life and you're sort of at a new church and now you're doing new things? Was it like, okay, this is just like now what I do now, and then you look back and you're like, oh wow, like I really learned a lot and grew a lot? Or was it as it was happening, you're like, this is very different, or like something is changing, something is, going on inside of me, God's working on me?
I think on a relational level, I knew it was different, but from like in hindsight, I don't think I realized what was happening. I realized, holy smokes, there's this senior pastor of a pretty good sized church, and it's only gotten bigger since then, but it was big for me, is willing to sit down and have breakfast with me and go through the scripture with me. That was mind-blowingly different. So on a relational level and how I interact with my pastors and the role that I believe that they should have in my life, I knew that was different. But did I know you're being discipled now? And it wasn't really like that. It was a much more organic kind of a thing.
Was that you pursuing Mark, or did he reach out to you?
He reached out to me. And it was kind of, when I came to Foothills, John Hoffman had spent a good deal of time with me on the phone. I was interning at this church. There's a youth ministry thing that was a struggle, and I didn't know what I was doing. And George Runyon had actually said, you got to call John Hoffman and talk to him. And I remember John spending, it felt like hours, right? I'm probably exaggerating. It was probably like 30 minutes, but it felt like he just dumped a wealth of knowledge on me and so much help. And so my dad had actually made a decision. He said, I want to go to Foothills. We're going to go to Foothills. And I said, I want to go with you. And largely because of my experience with John. And I marched right into John's office, probably the first month I was at Foothills, and said, I want to work for you. And he kind of laughed. He doesn't remember any of this, by the way. You can ask him about it. He doesn't remember any of this. And John Hoffman's a senior pastor at the Grove Church in Mission Valley, which my wife and I were involved with for a while. And he said, that's not how things work here. We don't just hire people. You have to get involved. We have to know who you are. So get involved. Let's take a look. And I think after that point, my name had kind of gotten brought up, right, in staff meeting or whatever. And Mark and I was involved in college ministry, super involved in college ministry, and Mark had reached out to me. Mark was pastoring college ministry at the time. And I think that's how, so he started pursuing me, but it definitely became a two-way street pretty quick because I realized I want more of whatever he's got. Whatever that is, I want more of that.
Yeah. Okay, so now take us through like your college years.
Yeah.
Now you're sort of transitioned into Foothills, and now your spiritual life was kind of being taken to another level, and you're also sort of working for the church and going to college, I'm assuming, at the same time as well.
Yeah. When I came to Foothills, I also, right around the same time, began going to Christian Heritage College, which is now San Diego Christian College. And I was going for a degree in biblical studies with an emphasis in youth ministry. I had always thought that I was called to be a pastor, right? I just had that feeling, or that, I don't know, that calling.
When you say always, since Mark started pastoring,
since I was
a kid,
young.
since
I was young.
Huh.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah. I mean, since Vineyard days, right? I mean, a long time ago. And so that also changed, and I was surrounded by other Christians in a biblical studies department who were seeking the Lord, and we were together searching out Scripture. And it was more than just a class. It was more than just trying to get a good grade. It was also, how does this actually work for us? Is this real or what? At least the group of people I was hanging out with were. I was hanging out with a group of people that loved to worship. There's a guy named Heath Hollinsby, Dominic Nuncio, a couple other guys. They're still involved in worship. They're still leading worship all over the place. And these guys we were having worship sessions till 3 o'clock in the morning up in the chapel. I mean, it was like, that's the kind of people I was hanging out with. And and that was a huge influence in my life. So that had also changed for me in college. So when I came to Foothills, before I ever worked for Foothills, I worked at Valley Athletic Club with Kevin Miller. He actually got me a job there. And I told Kevin, I said, I just want a job so I can be an intern at Foothills. And he said, all right, no problem. So I started there, and I did that, volunteered. I probably did 3 shifts at Youth Venture, 2 higher ground clubs, was going to school full time, 12 to 16 units at a time, and working. I can't remember if I was living on my own or if I was living back with my parents at that time. I'm not sure. I can't remember, but that doesn't matter. So, that was college years. All of college years was school, ministry. And when I started working at Foothills, Mark actually approached me and said, "Hey, I've got a position for you. I want you to run one of our Youth Venture teen centers." And I said, "Mark, I don't want to do that. I don't want to. I'm okay with doing the shifts, but I don't particularly like these kids. I want to work with church kids." And Mark just said, "That's the job I got for you." And I said, "Okay, I'll take it. I want that." And really, what I wanted was to be influenced by John and Mark. That's what I really wanted. Yeah. So I started doing that and going to school still. And that it probably took a solid year at Youth Venture before I caught a vision for it. In fact, Mark had to sit me down one point and just, I don't remember the exact context of the whole thing. And I don't know that he would even remember this, but I remember exactly where we were sitting in that teen center on the couches. And he said, "Nathan, you're insubordinate." Do you know what it means to be insubordinate? It's bad. That's like a bad thing to be. It was like
you're opposing, right?
Yes. It's more than just
you're holding it back,
being difficult. It's like literally I'm in opposition to what the leaders want to do.
Wow.
And that you being insubordinate in any business is a fireable offense. And I think at that point he was like, "You got to decide if you're going to follow the vision that we have and if you're going to work." And
what were you doing that made him say that?
I don't even remember. I don't know. I know that I was probably not showing up to shifts like I should. I probably wasn't treating it like I should because I didn't care. Honestly, that's the truth. I didn't love Youth Venture. Well, at that point, it was time for some soul searching. And what's interesting? The times when I need to get a vision for something, I've learned this from that Youth Venture time. I went and I scrubbed the toilets every night after it was closed. And I was, single and I could do this. I was literally scrubbing toilets, cleaning baseboards, and trying to clean that place up and keep it nice. And I would do that till 8 o'clock at night. Well, it was closed at 8 or 9, so I'd do that till 10 or 11 at night. And that is when I got a heart for that place. It was praying on that baseboard in the bathroom where some kid had just peed himself all over the floor. Whatever I don't know what these kids do. They just,
seriously, who knows?
Yeah, it's like pee on the ceiling. I'm like, I don't know how that even happens.
Hey, but take it easy, okay?
Yeah, that was probably Jeremy.
Yeah, probably.
So, but that's where I got a real, God gave me a heart for those kids as I got on my hands and knees and actually literally scrubbed the floor. And I'm not saying that everyone has to do that, but for me, that was like a game changer. It was, Mark called me out on a spiritual condition of my heart, and I began to seek the Lord through cleaning, physically cleaning, and saying, "God, what do you want from me? What are you doing?" And the Lord is showing me the treasure that's in each one of these kids at this teen center that I had never seen before my whole life. And from that point, so that I'm still in college, right? And at that point, that's when I really realized there's something valuable in these kids that nobody sees value in. Their parents don't see value in. The church struggles with because they use bad words. Some of them are using drugs. Some of them are just they're mean, cruel little creatures that come into this teen center and just make you feel terrible. And you're sitting here volunteering your time for this little scumbag, right? And God's going, "That's mine. That's my son. That's my daughter." And I think that's when I got a real heart for teenagers who are far from Christ, and usually at no fault of their own, their parents gave up on God a long time ago.
Yeah.
And so they don't, it's not like their fault. It is their fault, it's their responsibility, but they didn't know better. And we're sitting there going, "Hey, let's play a game of pool. Let me show you a better way. Let me show you a direction that you've never seen before, you haven't been invited into before." So that's where I got a heart for the lost. Was through that time in Youth Venture. I want to see Christian men and women, but obviously I'm a guy, so I want to see Christian men really discipled in the faith and really grow up in the faith. That's for sure. I want that. I also want to see these people who don't know Jesus, who are dirty, they're rough around the edges. The church certainly doesn't feel like, and I don't think this is true of our church, my church in particular, but it's all of our churches, right? We all go to the same church?
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, real fast, I want to jump in, or have you explain For those that don't know, like, what is Youth Venture? Like, what how did that start, and like, what is that through Foothills?
Yeah, Youth Venture is an incredible place that is sponsored by our church. And I believe we have 4 locations. I could be wrong. We might be sponsoring 5. But it is fully funded and staffed by volunteers from our church. So it is a building that gets rented in a strip mall, or in some cases we have freestanding buildings. And we fill it full of video games, pool tables, anything the kids would like, right? Anything you'd go to an arcade and pay for, they have there. And it's staffed by Christian men and women who are just there to be available, right? They're just available adults. It's a safe place. There's rules. There's guidelines. You can't fight. You can't use drugs there. You're not allowed to make out with girls in the corner. You're just not allowed to do that kind of stuff there. There's some rules and some guidelines. It's a safe place for teenagers to go after school. Generally open from 2:30 to 9 p.m. at night, and those hours may be changed. I don't entirely know, but and then we invite kids to do these lessons, right? And they're Bible-based character lessons. And so it's basically, here's the first 3 lessons. You're not an accident. You were created with a purpose, and your purpose is to know Jesus, right? That's the purpose of Youth Venture Teen Centers. And as these students are going through these, they're starting to realize, oh my gosh, my whole life I believed that we just evolved from monkeys. All this is just one big cosmic mistake, including myself. And in many cases, not in every case, but in many cases, these kids don't know who their dad is, or their dad walked out on them, or their mom's had a couple of different guys and they got a couple brothers and sisters from a couple different dudes. That's pretty commonplace. And these lessons are saying, you're not an accident. God designed you. He knew you before you were ever born. And he's called you to walk with him as his son or his daughter, which is life-changing for some of these kids. Absolutely life-changing. And then there's a bunch more lessons that kind of go through character and what it means to follow God, what it means to be a Christian, what it means to be a son and a daughter of God. So I'm a huge fan of Youth Venture Teen Center. They don't get any government money, right? This is not just a parachurch thing. This is the local church making an impact in a local community, and I am fired up about that. I think that's what churches are designed to do.
Yeah.
Not every church can handle sponsoring a youth venture, but every church is responsible to make a local impact right around them, directly around them. That is their job, to be a lighthouse in the community.
Yeah. There's something cool you said about like just the kids themselves and serving them. And I think it's easy to kind of cherry pick the ministries that you do or the way that you serve, and sort of like the easy or like the Instagrammable kind of ministries of going downtown and, handing out food, or you're just talking to, the girls with the young babies, and I don't know, just other ways maybe that are like easier. But when you have like little bratty kids who are like in opposition to you, they're cussing, they're swearing, they're saying no, they're like trashing the place, or they're like fighting other kids, that is a hard person to love. And I think that's like, it's not like the ultimate test, but it's a fantastic test of faith to choose to love someone that is like the hardest person to love.
Yeah.
And it really like forces kind of the spiritual muscle that we need to, just like Jesus does, to love unconditionally.
Yeah, I was going to say that they're not hard to love for Jesus.
Right.
They're hard to love from my perspective, from where I was raised. I was raised to respect the church, to love the church, love the people of God. That's how I was raised. So from my perspective, that little crazy person is hard to love. But when you get Jesus' heart, they're not hard to love.
Yeah.
Because he loves them so much more than I ever could. I actually think that's a great test for Christians everywhere. I mean, I don't know how much to say, but I feel like if you say, oh, that's just it's not my thing.
Yeah.
It's like, whoa, imagine if Jesus said that to you. I'm sorry, you're just not my thing. I mean, that might be someone else's thing, but that's just you're not my thing. And it's like, that is not the heart of Christ. The heart of Christ is to love people unconditionally, regardless of what they do to you. That's the turn the other cheek thing. Now, that doesn't mean you have to trust them. That's why there's rules, right? If you come and you steal from my cash box at the Youth Venture Teen Center, there are rules.
Don't trust them.
That have consequences, that put up barriers, right? And until you can overcome that or deal with the consequences of that, but my love for you doesn't change. My desire for you to be healthy, whole, and complete doesn't change. And I think that could be true of any. I mean, pick a vertical. Is it homelessness? You see that dirty guy in the street and you really struggle with that guy? Maybe. Some people love the homeless. They just want to give them a big hug. But for me to say, oh, it's just not my thing. I just don't love, I can't do that. I can do this. I couldn't adopt a kid, but I'll go to Africa for a week. I'm okay with that. But I couldn't actually bring that kid into my house. I mean, well, it's like, you have to ask yourself, and then we're not talking about seasons. We're talking about heart positioning. We're talking about your love for that person, right? I mean, you might be, Jeremy, you're not in the season to adopt, probably. I mean, most likely you could be. That's not up to me to decide, I guess.
Adopt a dog.
But I mean,
True.
I'm sorry. I shouldn't have even assumed that. That's not my place. You know your own seasons. But a person might look at their life and say, I'm not in a season to do that, to commit to this. Mm-hmm. But man, oh man, that God loves that person, and God has got something for them. And man, I want to help. If I have a way, I want to make a way for that person to make it easier for them to come to know Christ.
Well, I want to say, I think it's cool. Like, so we grew up in Foothills, so this is like normal to us, youth venture. But like stepping back to thinking, like, our senior pastor started this ministry is cool to think about, because I feel like if I was thinking of like a newer, or not a newer church, but like a seasoned church, I would think of like some form of like youth pastor, like younger member wanting to like catch a vision for this and to start it. But our like head pastor took the time to do this. And we think about like Shane Blayfield, like Brianna Polk, like people that came from Youth Venture that are now like prominent, like head, like for example, Shane's like our head like worship leader from our church, and he was one of those kids that
one of the punks.
Yeah, one of the punks that like no one wanted to love, no one. He was hard to love, right? And now he's leading worship for our church, which is really cool. So as we're talking about it, I'm like thinking about that, and
absolutely,
I think the fact that it came from our head pastor is like, it's astonishing. It's like a crazy thought to think about.
Well, that's the story of Paul, right? I mean, Saul was the punk. I mean, he was like a well-accomplished punk. He was the Pharisee, right? He's the big man, but he was killing Christians. Imagine being a Christian and God's saying, you got to love this guy. You are called to love this guy, and you're thinking, whoa, I don't know. That's kind of a high calling, Jesus. I'm not sure if I'm ready for that. But they didn't know that God had a calling for him and that God was going to knock him off of his donkey, right, and remove the scales from his eyes, and then he would see Christ, and he would be the guy that wrote most of the New Testament, and was a massive impact, absolutely massive, mind-blowing. We are here today most likely because of Jesus' work in Paul. And that is mind-blowing when you think about who he was. Yeah. And you could say the same about Shane or anybody, that's what Jesus does, is he takes something that is not useful to the kingdom of God on one end, he does this transformation thing, and then all of a sudden there's usefulness, and God just does his thing. It's in the business of redemption. He redeems trash to make it valuable.
Yeah.
So okay, so that was like what, early mid-20s. Like, take us through kind of the next steps of your life. Like, so that was Youth Venture, kind of taking this route, and then I want to hear about like a few things, which might be not fun to talk about, but I want to know kind of about like your career. So you went from Youth Venture, you started working for Ashford, and then there was a lot of debt that you accrued, and then eventually being married. So kind of walk us through that. I want to hear about that, kind of from your perspective.
No.
All right. Well, I can talk. Just kidding. I can talk about it from my perspective.
Yeah, tell us, Jeremy.
Marrying my sister. No, I'm just kidding.
Yeah, I'm curious about your perspective, actually. Just kidding. I don't want to hear it.
Yeah. I'll spare you.
I've actually, you know what? I have to stop and say I have appreciated your perspective in listening to your podcast.
Thanks.
That is the truth.
I appreciate that.
What about mine?
I feel like, no, I mean, I feel like you learn. I mean, we don't talk as much as we used to, right? We're all busy, and I've listened to your podcast recently, and I really, I'm surprised actually at how much I appreciate your perspective. So thank you. Thank you for being willing to do this, because you're putting yourself out there and trying something, and I've really appreciated it. Okay, careers. This has been interesting because I don't know. This might be longer than we want to talk about. Maybe not. I told you I always felt like I wanted to be a pastor, right? And so I'm doing the Youth Venture thing. Well, in the process of doing the Youth Venture thing, I'm also accumulating a significant amount of debt. And my first credit was at San Diego Christian or Christian Heritage College. That's the first time I ever had any debt, was when I took out student loans. And I don't know if my dad advised me against it or not. I can't remember that conversation. I'm going to give it the benefit of the doubt and say my dad probably said, "Don't do it, son. That's not going to be smart." And I said, "Whatever, Dad. You don't know what you're talking about." And I just did it anyways. That's probably how it actually went. But I don't remember getting advised that taking out the kind of debt that I did was probably not a good idea. I took the maximum amount out. So I went to school there for 2.5 years. I accumulated roughly $60,000 in debt. $60,000 in 2.5 years.
It's a lot of green, bro.
Yeah, to get a biblical studies degree. Don't generally recommend that. So I don't know if you know this.
The second half of your college?
Yeah. So I went to Grossmont College for 2.5 years, and then I went to San Diego Christian for 2.5 years. So I don't know if you know this, but pastors don't get paid a lot. Well, I don't know what I was thinking. I was stupid. I bought laptops and trips to foreign countries.
What were you thinking?
I was thinking, man, sweet, man, they're going to pay me to go to school. This is great. I'll pay it back eventually. Well, during that time, I had also taken out a credit card and a couple of other things, and I probably accumulated. I have the official numbers. I have literally written it all out somewhere because I've done a talk on finances and what God can do. But I literally had somewhere in the neighborhood of $70,000 in debt by the time I graduated from college, maybe a little bit after that. And that was tough working at Youth Venture. I think I was getting paid $23,000 a year as an intern. Maybe it was less than that, but it was not very much money. And when you have $70,000 in debt, that math doesn't work out well. So I had to quit, and I felt very defeated. I went and worked at Ashford, and that was a good experience for me. Honestly, it was a 8 or 9 to 6 job that I did for 4.5 years, and I learned a lot about corporate culture. I learned a lot about a work ethic. I learned a lot about rules and showing up on time and kind of a box that you don't necessarily get when you work for a church or as an intern. There wasn't that structure. And so to have that structure was actually very helpful. And I paid off all of my credit card debt during that time, and a car. By the way, I got a car out. So by the time I was all fully maxed out, it was like $85,000 plus or minus. So by the time I had gotten married, I had paid off all my credit card debt and most of my car.
We know that story.
Yeah, I've told you that story before. It's a depressing part of my life. Well, I mean, it's a character building time, right? I was really, and I don't want to say that it's all worked out. I mean, there's this constant struggle of working out character, and maybe the things I failed at then, I wouldn't fail at now, but we always have failings that we have to struggle through and repent and deal with, and that is a normal part of life. That is normal. So anyways, I'll just tell everyone the story because why not? I lied to my wife, and I told her that I owed X amount on a car. I was truthful about every other penny, but the car, I held back that I owed like another, I don't remember what it was, $5,000 or something like that. Why I did that, I have no idea.
Yeah, what were you thinking? Because she was going to find out at some point.
Jeremy, what was
this is for our listeners, okay?
Well, I honestly don't know because I told her I think I was ashamed. I mean, there was shame, and I think I felt like if I held something back, that I was preserving some of that dignity, right, that I didn't have in telling her how much debt I had. And your sister is like the financial genius of my world, right? I mean, she knows how to handle money, and she had zero debt. She had bought a house before we got married. I mean, she was like on top of her game, and I was not. I was the exact opposite. And so...
So you were married when she found out? Or?
Oh, yeah. So we got married. Well, she said, listen, I love you in spite of your debt. Good job paying off all your credit cards. Good job, paying off most of your car. We still got this massive student loan thing, but I love you anyways. Let's get married, and we'll deal with that as a married couple. Praise God for grace, man. I'll just tell you that much right now. And so after we got married, we combined finances. She had more than I did, and we wrote a check to pay off my car, quote unquote. And what I had done was I paid ahead. So I mean, every bill that would come every single month just said, you don't owe anything. You still have this balance of X amount, but you don't owe anything because you paid ahead. And every month I was like, oh, throw that away. Uh-oh, throw that away. throw that away. And so one day, and this is the thing about sin. If you're following Jesus, it kind of grates at you. It like eats at you, where you feel unrest. I don't know how to describe it. And so one day I went to John Hoffman. We were going to the Grove, and we had gone to the Grove together. Before we got married, we went to help plant the Grove. And I went to John and said, Pastor, this is what I did. And John said, okay, let's pray. Let's work out a plan, and you need to tell your wife. And so I went home, and I think a day or two went by, and I sat her down, and I told her, and I am like crying, right? I'm like emotional because I had lied to my wife. I mean, this is like, you just know you don't do that, right? Yeah. And I didn't know how she's going to respond. Joanna, she can be, on some things she can be very matter of fact and to the point and a little bit abrasive. I don't mean that in a bad way. It's just her personality type. But I'll tell you what, when it comes to dealing with sin and brokenness and pain, she's the exact opposite. She is the exact opposite. And she just said, okay, thanks for telling me the truth. Let's deal with this. And we paid it off. And there's been, I'm not saying it was all easy. It was like, I forgive you. Let's fix this. And it's literally years of working back and building trust again. Years of it. So that was a very painful. Thanks for bringing that up. Appreciate it.
Gotcha, bro.
Love talking about that story. But so that was a good character building experience, right, during that time. So I also was able to get my master's degree at Ashford, which was incredible. And then as soon as I got my master's degree, I quit, and we moved to South America or Central America for 6 months. We went to Cuba for a month. We went to Costa Rica for 3 weeks-ish, 3.5 weeks, and went to Guatemala for about 4.5 months. And that was just a fantastic trip. I mean, God really ministered to us. It was really, really great. And we stayed in Carlos Merlot's house. Shout out to Carlos Merlot. He is a world-famous soccer player in Guatemala, so I'm thankful for him because we stayed in his house. But then we came back, and we had been talking to our church. Our church really sent us to do this, which is really cool. And when I came back, John offered me a position as a part-time youth pastor. During that time, I also took on an online job working for basically a youth pastor mentoring program, which was really fun. That was a good experience for me. Huh. And we did a thing where we encourage youth pastors to come get free mentoring, resources, help for their youth ministries. I enjoyed that. And then I went full-time at the Grove and was at the Grove for about 4 years, 4.5 years, 4 years, somewhere in there. There's basically 4-year cycles for me. Right? That's kind of what I've realized. And then after we had built the church, and one day at the Grove, I just really realized our season here is done. And I don't know how else to describe it, but our season was done. So there was an opportunity to work at Le Bon's, which was interesting.
Explain that, because people that don't know.
Okay, so you're right. Forgive me. Le Bon's Landscaping, family-owned company of the Le Bon family. Mike and Julie Le Bon started the company in 1984-ish, and Joanna is actually the CEO of the company. And there was an opportunity to come in as an operations manager, which I thought, I got this. This is going to be easy. Turns out it's not easy.
No.
Turns out I didn't know what I was doing. We also lost the biggest client for our company's history during that time. Restructured. I joined as an account manager. Went through about 2 years of literal hell. I mean, it was like
I
the
was
hardest.
with you, bro.
You were right there. It was one of the hardest times of my entire life. But I feel like I learned an awful lot real quick.
Well, so hold on. So more like context. So you came in as the operations manager and then an account manager, but working essentially like for your wife, right? So your
Correct.
Father-in-law owns the company, and your wife is the CEO. So
those are tough dynamics.
Yeah, and then while the company is struggling, and you're learning a new role under your wife. So, talk about that. I want to know, like, from your perspective, like, what is it like as a man, like, to lead a home outside of work, but then at work you are under your wife?
I think you got it.
I want to make it very clear for those that don't know.
Thank you for clarifying.
Well, I'm thinking like
the intricate details of my pain.
Like my perspective now, like being married, like I couldn't imagine like working for my wife at my father-in-law's company. So I think I'm not trying to hound you, but I think like it takes a special kind of man to do that.
Honestly, I truly am curious because, like you said, those 2 years were really tough. And I mean, I think it also correlates pretty well to, when you were at the year with Youth Venture and, Mark said you're insubordinate, and then you went down on your knees and started cleaning, after hours and reset the vision. So, and we know that things turn around for the better and that things, improve. But like, I'm just, take us through the experience and how God taught you through all this.
Yeah. So I'm laughing so hard because it was. And it is difficult. It's not like magically not difficult. Thing with family business is when it's going good, it's going real good. Everyone's real happy, and when it's going bad, it's pretty bad. I mean, it can be very difficult. And Joanna and I are not a separate our work and life type people. We just are not like that. We stay up and talk about work until 10, 11 at night, almost every night. And that's a pretty standard. We were like that at the Grove, though, too. We believe in a vision, and we work really, really hard at that vision. And it doesn't matter what we're doing. This is what we are working on. And honestly, I married Joanna because I believe that we are better together than we are apart. And I mean, Joanna is an incredibly strong leader. So to answer your question, there was a role thing, right, that we had to learn that was really important. There was a leave and cleave issue. So if you're a newly married man and your wife is going to her dad to fulfill some kind of emotional issue or emotional thing, that's unhealthy. It's actually not right. It's not correct. She should be going to her husband. And that is a very important part of this leave and cleave principle from the Bible. So we're talking to Christian men and saying this is what it's like to be a young Christian man. And there are very real roles that have to be understood and lived out. And I have a strong wife. And I mean, I know that a lot of people have got strong wives. I have a strong wife, and she is literally the boss of 120 plus people. And I mean, she is very much in control of that world. And so for me to come in and work as her employee and your dad's employee, my father-in-law's employee, created very unique challenges. And I think the most important one, because of the work ones, I have, and I've said this before, I have no problem with following her at work. She's an incredible leader. She knows what she's doing, and I appreciate her leadership and perspective, and I'm like, let's go. You tell me how to do this, let's get it done. Let's do it. And I love that. Does that mean that she's allowed to come in and criticize my every move because she's my wife? No. She is still my wife at work. But I also have to follow her lead at work. And when we get home, it switches. Now she's got to follow my lead at home, right? And that's the biblical way. So it's not exactly politically correct these days, but that is the biblical model. And so she has to come home and say, okay, I'm going to submit to my husband, not just at home, but at work too. And but with that being said, I have to lead my wife, right? And what does the Bible say? The Bible says to lead your wife, actually it says to love your wife like Christ loved the church and gave himself up for her. I mean, the type of leadership that we're talking about is not, honey, we're doing this, and you're going to come here, and you're going to do this, and you got to do that. It's, I'm going to die to every single desire I have in my heart in order to serve and love you. And in return, you will follow the call that God has placed on my life. And we're going to do this thing together. And you're going to support and love me in spite of my failures, right? That's the exchange. And I'm oversimplifying. There's probably a lot more to it than that. But so that whole process was incredibly difficult and incredibly painful. And I can tell you that we had many, many difficult conversations, some arguments, some fights. We still do. Sometimes we have some discussions that are not pleasant. But I think that for us, the biggest thing was learning roles. So I personally had to learn a new skill. Right? I had to learn a whole new career, which, by the way, if you're a young man, it's not fun. I mean, if you've got like a trajectory, try your best to stay in that trajectory if you can. with that being said, sometimes we have to change, and it is what it is. But yeah, it's very, very hard. I do not like the idea of going into a whole new, genre of work that I would have to learn all over again.
You were like 33 at the time?
Well, I don't know. How old am I now? I'm 37.
Yeah, so probably right there.
Yeah, 33-ish.
Yeah.
And which, by the way, I've been at Le Bon's Landscaping the longest that I've been at any job ever in my life.
You made it past 4 years?
Yeah, past 4 years.
Breaking the cycle.
So, yeah, I'm breaking the cycle, which, by the way, I did the master's program with a guy named Bob Shank with your dad. Context for those who don't know, Mike Le Bon. And it was an incredible process of growth and learning about myself and learning about skills. So the first 2 years of working at Le Bon's were incredibly terrible, but I also learned that I was not in a very good role for my personality type. So now I'm the director of business development. It's been a much better last year and a half. I'm loving what I do. I absolutely love what I do the last 2 years. It's just been fun.
So tell us about, I don't want to say failure, but the first 2 years you were in a few roles that you like you touched on that weren't natural and were difficult. So tell us about hold on, Nathan's coughing.
Sorry.
I want to know, how did you navigate failing to an extent, right, at a new job under your wife? What was that like, and how as a man do you, I don't want to use the word pride, but maintain I guess dignity, and as you're going through a rough time, for 2 years, which is a long time. I want to know about that.
I don't think that dignity is a right. Neither is pride. In fact, I think they're pretty big weaknesses. So I think that I had to go through a process of realizing that I am not the man.
Not the man, you said?
Yeah, as in the man.
Yeah.
I'm not as awesome as I think I am. And I'm not as great as I think I am. And I need to learn about who I really am and walk in that with humility. So in terms of dignity, I think that, again, that goes back to the role issue, right? Realizing I have to lead my wife through this. I can't just go, oh, poor B. I'm in a terrible situation. That's that's not manly. If you want to be a man, stop being a whiner. If you heard nothing else from today, if you want to be a man, stop being a whiner. And I'm a whiner. That's what I do. I look at things and I go, oh man, things could be so much better. Jeez, why can't we do this? And oh man, this is happening. And that's just not being a man. Being a man is saying, I'm going to make the best out of this. Being a man is saying, how do I improve this position? Being a man says, how do I impact the community or the environment that I find myself in, whether that's work, my family, wherever I'm at. It's not look at what you're doing to me. It's how am I going to affect change in this environment? And that is what being a man is being the thermostat, not the thermometer. So that was definitely a process. And I think I had some wins during that time. And it wasn't all failure. It wasn't all difficult. There were some really good times. There were some really good things that happened. And there were some monumental difficulties that happened as well.
Yeah. No, and that's hard. Props to you for going through that now.
Well, one thing that I learned through that, kind of going, the whole idea of the grass is greener fallacy, right? We kind of talked a little pre-show, but there's this idea that I'll be happy when I get over there, or man, if I were to be in this, then I would be much better off, or it'll be better when I'm married, I have this job, I finish this degree, whatever the situation is. There's this idea of it's going to be better over there, and that is a fallacy. It's false. When you're standing up close to anything, you see the flaws. I'm sitting at this table right here, and I see this.
Whoa, that's my table,
Look
bro. Hey, take it easy, dog.
Right?
Yeah, no, I'm with you.
But if I was back, I didn't notice that until just this second. And why? Because I'm sitting this close to it.
Yeah.
I wouldn't have even noticed if I just walked past. But that is what the grass is greener fallacy is. It's saying, gosh, man, it looks so much better over there. Look at all this stuff I got to deal with over here. I'm on this side of the fence, and this grass has got, look, there's a brown spot there, and I got weeds right there. And oh my gosh, I think that's a rat. It's just that's what over there it looks super green. But if you were to walk over to that side and look down, you would see the same problems, maybe different problems, but you would still find problems. That is true in any relationship that we have. When you are standing close, you see nothing but flaws. And that's actually one of the coolest things about marriage And this was a struggle early in our marriage when I'd be with Joanna at whatever function we were at, right, before we worked together, and she would be happy and bubbly and friendly and nice, and I'd be like, cool, man, this is great. We get in the car, and she's like, oh, God, I'm ready to be home. And I'm like, what just happened to you? Like, who is that? That's not, like, you were just so happy. And she's like, yeah, well, I am tired, and I'm ready to be home. And you're like,
don't
what?
talk to me.
And she'd probably be mad. In fact, she's going to hear this and go, why would you say that? But the truth is, I actually learned something very valuable. She said, I'm only like this with you because you see the real me. And there is something so beautiful about seeing the reality of where we are. There's something so beautiful about being so intimate with something that we see the blemishes and the flaws and the hurts and the pains, and we embrace that. Don't run. Don't say, oh, gosh, I can't. This table is hideous, by the way. I mean, you should get a new table, really. But, I mean, instead of running from the problems that we face, embrace it and figure out how to improve and how to multiply. And I think that's been a really good life lesson working at LeBon's Landscaping with my wife, and my father-in-law, which has been in some ways very, very difficult. But I could say, look at all the problems I see here. I can't deal with that. I got to go over here to where I think it's going to be better. But the reality is when I get there, I'm going to find a lot of similarities in the problems.
Yeah. So how do you balance that with, not just like pointing out things and whining or just, sort of not being content or happy with where you are and wanting things to be better or having ambition for something else, or even, Jeremy and I talked a while back about the dip and knowing when to quit, and that there are times and places and seasons where it's okay to stop doing what you're doing and start doing something else, or to call it and to, say, okay, well, like this thing isn't going to amount to what I think it is, and this is a cul-de-sac. I need to find the next path for me. So how do you balance, essentially being where you are, if that's not the best place, that's not the most happy place, with, striving for better in the future and wanting better?
Yeah, I would say don't quit because it's hard. Quit because you don't see fruit. Quit because there's a calling to do something else and there's an opportunity. But if you just quit because it's hard, I think that you have got no backbone.
Yeah.
You quit because there's a better opportunity. That's okay. Yeah. I think it's okay to say, this is not producing the fruit that I know that I can accomplish or whatever. That's one thing. And then maybe it's, man, I really got a burden. I'm seeing great fruit here, but I got a burden in my heart for this, and I believe God's called me, and oh my goodness, look at this opportunity that just opened up. That's a good reason to move. That's a good reason to go somewhere.
Yeah.
But if you just quit because it's hard, I think that makes you, I mean, what politically correct word can I use for manhood when you just quit because it's hard?
Yeah, well, I think, rather than quitting when it's hard, I quit, once you've overcome that, dip. But once you've overcome,
That's good.
Because there can be an opportunity, and it can still be hard. And so if you quit because you have a new opportunity, it's like, well, you left what was hard for the newer, the greener side of things. So I think,
and it's gonna be hard on that side too.
Yeah, for me, when I left LeBon's, I made it my goal was to quit once I overcame what was hard. I wanted to leave on a positive note, which that process sucked and was hard. It wasn't fun, but that was my goal. I don't think I did it perfectly, but that was what I was aiming to do. Leave once I've overcame the difficult side of things.
Well, in working with you, my perspective is you left very well.
Thank you.
And I mean, you did exactly what you needed to do, and I think you left very well. Most people would not leave like you left. In fact, most people don't.
Yeah.
Several others have left, right? And they didn't leave anywhere near like you did. So, yeah, I agree with you. I think you leave. Well, I mean, if you're a famous and very good basketball, football, baseball star, do you want to leave, before you win the championship? Right? Do you want to leave sometime after that? Do you want to leave after you've had a 6-season losing streak? Right? You want to leave on the high, right?
Yeah.
Leave when you're doing well. And I think that's a great indicator. It doesn't always work that way, but I think it's a great indicator. But if you just leave because it's hard, I mean, it's one thing if your boss forces you to leave because you're not performing or doing a good job. That's one thing, and that's another life lesson. It's a separate life lesson. But if you just say, "This is just too hard, I give up," when your boss is sitting there saying, "You can do this. Come on, let me show you. You can do this. You can do this. We can do this," right? Or if you've got some thing you're starting up or this podcast, for example, you don't just quit because whatever. Because it's difficult. You do it out of a love for it, out of a desire for it to grow. And then, you just keep plugging away, and it's going to be a grind. That's how life works. Yeah. Everything is a grind. That's partially a result of sin, right? When Adam and Eve fell, now it became hard to work the garden. Yeah. Now the garden doesn't produce fruit like you want it to. In fact, it produces thorns, which actually hinder your work. It hurts you.
I think it says that the earth will work against you. So it's not even like it's going to be hard. It's like there are forces actively opposing you.
And that is a result of sin.
Yeah.
And thank God for Jesus, who has overcome the world, right? So he can actually make it go well for you. He can actually do his thing and make things go well. But I think that there's that idea of, hey man, this is just too hard. I quit. And I think that's a good lesson to learn, especially as a young person, because if you're a young man listening to this podcast and you're thinking, what does it mean to be a young man? Learn this lesson now, because I promise you, marriage and kids will kill you if you don't learn this message. They absolutely will kill you. If you don't learn how to work through hard things now, marriage and children will kill you. Yeah. And you'll want to quit. You'll be done. And that's what we see in our culture, right? That's why most marriages are ending in divorce, because people don't know how to deal with hard things. So if you're a young man listening to this podcast right now and you're thinking, I want to be married, it'll just solve all my problems. Mm-hmm. It might, but only if you learn the lessons first. Otherwise, marriage magnifies it all and makes everything exponentially more complicated and difficult. And then you throw a kid on top of that, and holy smokes, it's hard.
Yeah.
And so you have to learn how to overcome hard things. And then as you meet these new challenges, you'll be better prepared to overcome them. Much like David and Goliath. He said, I already defeated the lion. Imagine how hard that was. I've defeated the bear. Imagine how hard that was. And we saw Goliath. He said, I know I'm going to overcome him because of what God has done for me. And so there's this process of overcoming that starts small, and it gets bigger and bigger. And that's, if you want to be successful in life, that's a lesson to learn.
Yeah. So you've been married for how long now?
9 years.
9 years. Come on. Okay. And you're
it feels like 6 months, baby.
And your daughter is how old?
5.
5. Okay. So that means you had about 4-ish years
of pure bliss.
And now you have a son as well.
Yep. 19 months.
Possibly more babies in the future.
Possibly.
Walk us through, being married, having kids. Like, what have been the challenges, the lessons learned, learning, how to be a father and parenting as well.
Well, I could go through the challenges and I could enumerate them and make a very long list of challenges, but I'm not going to do that. Yeah. I want to talk about the positives, because I think that it's really. I think it's pretty natural to romanticize things, but I think our culture makes it pretty clear that marriage is not a popular, easy thing. So I'm not going to talk about some of the challenges, and I've already talked about some of them in working with Joanna. But the positives of being married. I love that I have someone to come home to. Even if we're going through something difficult or something hard, I absolutely love that I have somebody at my home, or I get to be the person that's at home she gets to come home to, and we have each other.
Yeah.
And, when push comes to shove, we're on the same team, and we're going to fight for each other. And I cannot tell you how comforting that is and how incredibly powerful that is. And so I don't think that, I sometimes I think about, I don't know if you have ever had these thoughts, but it's like, man, what if my wife died? And it's like,
sometimes.
Man, I start thinking about what life would look like if she wasn't there. And my wife will go on a business trip, or she'll go with the girls somewhere or something. And I think about, what if she didn't come home? What would life look like? And it makes me so incredibly sad. Not because of what she does for me, which is enormous, a ton of stuff, but because of who she is in my life. And it's very, very hard to imagine not having that team, right? We're together in this. So I love that stability that comes with marriage. With kids, I'll tell you the lesson that came with my daughter. When she was born, I caught her, right? So out she came, and I caught her, and I cut the umbilical cord.
You caught her? Really?
Oh, yeah.
Wow.
Oh, dude, I was right there. I was in the action, man.
See, I don't know. I mean, I'm not there yet, but I haven't really thought about actually catching my child.
Oh, it's intense.
Did you like have to choose to do that, or
Oh, yeah.
was the doctor like,
Well, the
hey, get in here?
Well, so my wife was like, I'm going to do this thing all natural. I don't want an epidural. I'm going to do it 100% natural. And so I think the doc may have like kind of known we were hippies or something. And so he was like, would you like to catch the baby? And I was like, yeah, heck yeah, I do. And actually, I think there were women both times. But anyways, whatever. The doctor said, do you want to catch the baby? And I was like, yes, I do.
Oh my God.
And so with Grace came so fast, which, by the way, the whole labor process is crazy. I mean, what a woman's body does is
well, that's what I'm saying.
absolutely-
How would you want to catch the baby? I mean,
It's my child.
okay, all right. I respect it. No, honestly, I am.
I don't know. My mom's a nurse.
Astonished.
My mom's a labor and delivery nurse, and so I kind of grew up
Oh.
with all of that my entire life. So I don't think I'm as
It's in you.
squeamish as some people, but so I got to catch her, and in fact, I had to put on like the scrubs and everything, and the doc was like, "Okay, put on the scrubs." So I put on the pants and the shirt and the hat, and then I was trying to put on the gloves. Like, "Okay, Dad, get over here," and I was like, didn't have my gloves on. I was like, "Okay," and I literally went over there with no gloves,
Oh.
and the baby was like coming out, like, and I caught that kid, and that baby was in my arms. I'm like looking at this baby, and I was like, "Oh my gosh!" I put the baby on Joanna, which, by the way, is incredible. Okay, I'm not going to tell you that story. Anyways,
We'll get there.
well,
It'll come soon.
it has to do with nipples and things, so I'm just going to avoid
yeah,
that.
Yeah,
That's
avoid.
okay.
Never
Yeah.
mind. Yeah.
So you may not want to get
Yeah,
there.
we'll skip.
But
I meant like that time's
the way
coming for
God
us.
designed this process is just absolutely incredible. And they take the baby to go weigh the baby and all this stuff. And I'm sitting there staring at this baby, and I'm realizing I like got a sense of God's love for me. In a second, I realized I love this baby more than anything in the world. I would do anything for this child. And this little crying baby can't do one thing for me. And in a second, I realized the father heart of God.
Yeah.
I can't do anything for God. Nothing I do is of any value at all. I'm that little crying baby on a table. And it's like, that is who I am to the Lord. And he's going, I love you. Like that. And anyways, that was a mind-blowing experience for me of realizing the father heart of God. And I think about that often. Like when my kid would wake up at 3 o'clock in the morning screaming and freaking out, or when they wet the bed, or when they're whining.
Hey, we weren't going to
or-
talk about the challenges, just the positives.
whatever the difficulties might be. It's really, that is a massive positive. And then just being with your son is just something special. I don't know how to describe it. Having a daughter is, she's like in my heart, right? My son, I'm like, let's go do an adventure. Let's go do something fun. Let's go, like, let's conquer the world together. And so I've had a lot of fun with him. We went, oh my gosh, okay, I got to tell you a story. How much time do we have?
Plenty. All the time
As
in
much
the
as you
world.
want. Yeah.
This is going to be
as
such a
much
long
as your
pod-
wife will allow you.
This
As
is-
long as people listen, I mean,
This is going to be such a long podcast, no one is going to listen. They're going to be like,
That's not
okay,
true.
32 minutes, I'm done. Wait, we've been on this thing for like an hour.
Our average is like an hour. So
Yeah, all right. Well, we went on vacation, and we went to Atlantis in Bahamas, which, by the way, is a lot of fun. And we went to this water park. Well, Joanna goes, hey, well, let's go on the lazy river. And so we all go over to this lazy river, right? And there's these rafts, and I got a 19-month-old kid. So we tried to put on a life vest, but it was way too big. And so we put it on him anyways, and he's like kind of poking his head out. It's a lazy river, right? I'm like, it's not that big of a deal. He knows how to hold his breath. He'll be fine. Well, then I look at the sign, and the sign says Rapid River.
oh my gosh.
And I was like, that's a funny name for a lazy river. So we go on it, and the lady was like, whoa. She pulls us over and takes the kid out, and she's like, this life vest does not fit on this kid. You need to take that life vest off. Took it off. I was like, all right. She's like, all right, get in, have a good day. I was like, what
Wait,
the
take it
heck?
off?
Yeah, I'm like in a foreign country, right? This is one of those foreign country moments.
Okay.
And they don't follow the rules quite as strictly. So I got this kid, I'm in a double inner tube. I'm sitting in the back with my legs up, so for visuals, I look like I'm about to have a baby on this table, right? My legs are up in this raft, and they're like, here, put your legs together and put the kid on the front hole in between your legs. Well, Caleb, 19-month-old Caleb, is literally holding on to the little handles in the front in my legs, going like this. Hey, he's like looking around. He's super happy. Got a smile on his face.
Which, by the way, like the cutest kid ever. So well
Yeah,
done.
super cute.
I can only imagine.
Yeah, look me up on Facebook. You'll see. Anyways, so he's going down this, and it's like super cool, right? Super lazy. And then all of a sudden there's like this little wave, right? And Joanna's like, I don't know if this is a good idea. And there's like this little wave. And then we get to this point where it goes, rapids. And there's literally a little channel that goes straight down into, well, the story's going to get exaggerated over the years. By the time he's 18, they're going to be 12-foot waves. But literally, they're probably 2 to 3 foot rapids, like just like this. And he's sitting alone in the front of this thing in between my legs holding on. I'm thinking, this kid's going to die. And so we go down these rapids, just boom, we hit hard, and he's flopping all over the place. And I'm thinking, okay, all right. I think I could catch him. I think he'd probably be fine. Joanna comes out, oh, we got to stop this. We got to stop. I'm like, you need to calm down. Get back in your raft. This is my son. He's fine. And he went through the whole thing, and he had a blast. He had so much fun. By the end, he's just laughing. And Joanna was scared to death, but that's a mom's job, to worry and be scared. It was my job to make sure that he almost dies. So let that be a lesson to you, fathers.
That's amazing. I can only imagine him laughing and being happy through the whole time.
Oh, I wish I had video so bad. But I'm telling you, it was like he should not have been on that ride. He should not. There's no question. If this was America, he would not have been on that ride.
If this is America, CPS would have been called on you at the end of the ride. And
maybe.
Hopefully,
CPS is not listening to this right now. If so, my name is...
What's your alias?
Phil Ortiz.
My name is Dan Dealing, and I'm the principal of the high school.
So okay, that's like having kids. Also wanted to ask, you and Joanna have always been like planners, always kind of thought out the future and prepared. So kind of wanted to know, like, when you were our age, what were some of the plans you had? And then also, like, for me and Corey, like being early 20s, like striving, planning for the future, like what would you recommend for us to do? And kind of like based off your like testimony, what would you do differently kind of thing?
Well, I think Joanna is definitely more of a planner than I am. So I have learned from Joanna and adopted much of what she has done because I see how it works. It works very, very well. And so I am a big fan of planning. But with that being said, I would way rather go through life, hey, what's going on over here? Great. It's like
shiny object syndrome.
For sure. Well, my Enneagram personality is a 7, which, by the way, if you haven't done Enneagram, you definitely should. It's really, really helpful.
We just talked about it, actually.
I'm a 3.
Corey? I'm a 1.
1, okay.
Yeah.
So, and then like under stressful circumstances, how you tend to act, and you tend to, kind of in a healthy state.
Yeah.
In an unhealthy state, you're probably a serial killer, but, whatever. It's like, I highly recommend Enneagram. But the 7 personality is very, I'm fascinated with new things. And I used to think that was a weakness, and I think in the wrong context it can be, but I think it's a strength. And so my personality type would be go wherever the fun's happening. Life doesn't work that way, right? That's not how real life works. So you have to learn how to find the fun in those things for my personality type. But so in terms of planning, I think you have to plan to put Jesus first. You have to plan that. That is, you schedule time and you make that happen. You spend time in the Word of God. You spend time in prayer. If you plan nothing else in your entire life, plan that. After that, you have to plan when you're going to spend time with your significant other, with your wife, or with your kids. That requires time on the calendar. You have to plan your work day out. And if you're self-employed, I mean, you really, and you're kind of in it. You're not self-employed per se, but you're in a pretty like flexible.
Yeah.
You make your own life up, and you have to plan out what you do in order to meet the goals at the end of the day, right? So that's an important thing. In terms of life planning, get your finances in order, and I recommend doing this. Because don't do what I did, kids. Do not let your finances get out of control and then think that your spouse is going to fix it for you. It probably won't happen that way. And I can tell you right now that if you're in a significant amount of debt, you're both working, you have a kid, and you're wondering where rent's going to come from, or how you're going to buy groceries, or how you're going to buy diapers for your kid, that is a stress you do not want to know. And that is normal for many, many people. Many people listening to this might be thinking, good Lord, that's me. And if you're not in that position, think about what you can do now to prevent that. You can avoid that in your life. It's possible, right? So get your finances in order. I really, really encourage that. Always, we're talking to Christians, so always tithe. And then, in my opinion, be generous. You do your 10%. That is a bottom line. I give 10% to the church that I go to, and then be generous. Give another 5%. Shoot for the stars. Give 10% more. I mean, just be generous. Be a generous person. Save, live. I love that minimalism is a new thing. That's not my style. I'm an excessive person, but I think that that is the right mindset. It's how can I avoid giving into consumerism? That is a really good mindset. Get your finances in order.
Yeah.
So I highly recommend starting to save for retirement now. If you think you're gonna do that when you're 40, you may be putting yourself in a bad position. So if you can save right now when you're 20, you should start doing that.
Yeah.
Save.
Did you and Janet have an idea of where you wanted to be in a couple of years or in 10 years or in 20 years? And,
yeah, absolutely.
And how did you talk about that?
Yeah, I mean, we look down, we've done it in a couple different ways, right? There's different, you can Google, how do I life plan? And you'll find a bajillion articles on different perspectives. I recommend doing that. And we've done that a couple times, and we'll say, okay, what are the callings in my life? What's in my heart? For both of us, we'll both say that and write that down, and then we kind of write out all the different activities that we're doing, and we ask, is this activity helping us get to that point? So yeah, I definitely think we've done it. Did I expect to be working at LeBron's Landscaping? Not in my wildest dreams. So I think that a plan is really good, and it gets you so far. But I think the best thing about having a plan is that when it doesn't go to plan, you know how to make a new plan pretty quickly. I guess there's different personality types. My personality type tends to be very flexible. It's hey, this isn't how we expected it. Let's adjust. Let's figure out how to readjust our plan. So yeah, I'm a huge planner. I'm a big fan of that. I think we've planned to when we want to have our kids, which not everyone gets to do that. We have been able to so far, so praise God for that. We've planned our finances to save a certain amount each month in order to afford vacations and retirement plans or our goals are to buy houses. So that's our retirement plan. We're saving in order to buy real estate. So that's our plan, right? And we'll see how it goes. I might be completely bankrupt in 10 years. You never know. You just don't know. But you plan, and then you work the plan, and then if you have to change, you adapt, you make changes.
Yeah.
If you get so stuck on your plan that it has to go that way, I think you'll be a very sad, miserable human being because life doesn't always go that way. But if you are willing to be flexible with the way life works, I think planning is really, really good. It teaches you how to come up with alternatives and contingencies and things like that.
Yeah. You had talked about a little bit pre-show just about the costs of discipleship and your admiration for, some of the more admirable characters in kind of, in the Bible, in kind of Christian history of people like Bonhoeffer, Nehemiah, some of the other people that you like. Could you just speak a little bit more to, what it means? Essentially, we didn't get into it very much, but what does it mean to you, the cost of discipleship and why you wanted to talk about it?
Yeah, so Dietrich Bonhoeffer is probably one of my all-time heroes for a lot of reasons. One, because I love politics, and Phil talked a lot about it, so I'm not going to get into it. Which, by the way, Phil Ortiz is an incredible person. I have a great deal of respect for him.
Shout out.
Shout out to Phil.
Hashtag Phil Ortiz 2020. So I really love Phil. He's a brother of mine, and I think that he really understands the importance of Christians being involved in our community, period. In the United States of America, we have an incredible opportunity to be involved in our government. Government is actually a reflection of us, right? It's a government of the people, by the people, for the people. That is unique in the world. Jesus did not have that kind of government, right? He lived under a dictatorship. That's the environment that he lived in. Bonhoeffer also lived under a dictatorship. And Dietrich Bonhoeffer took a very strong stance against the Third Reich, and he was a He was staunchly opposed. That's a good word. He was just like he was a wall, right? Yeah. And he would not move. And he had a radio show, and he had all kinds of stuff that he spoke out against the Third Reich publicly, which was a big no-no. But he from a Christian perspective, this is not right. What is happening in our culture is not right. It is not acceptable that we are massacring our own people, specifically Jews. This is not right. And I love that, because I think, you know what? There's a lot about our culture that is not right. And Christians seem to be, in many cases, unwilling to take a stand in one way or another. And usually the stand is a Facebook post, or it's I'll vote for that guy, but I won't vote for that guy. And most of the time it seems like it's just I'm not going to vote. I'm just staying out of it. I'm just going to just backing off. And maybe that's because of, the 1980s and 1990s Christian right movement, right? Which was like Christians are always against something. And maybe more modern Christians are kind of like, well, maybe we need to rethink how we're approaching this whole thing. Maybe that's kind of what's going on. I'm fine with that if we rethink it and then we actually live stuff out. That's fine with me.
Yeah. Or maybe not like default to things and sort of put some more thought behind it. And
Sure. Well, I mean, the biggest thing is abortion. I cannot even imagine any argument in which abortion is somewhat even remotely acceptable. Right?
Yeah.
And now that I've had 2 kids and I've literally caught both of my children, I'm sitting there going, this is a human life, right? It doesn't matter what stage that's at. The heartbeat starts at like 6 weeks or something. It's like there's a human being in there. This is not just a fetus. So this is a strong stance against abortion. But I'll tell you what, I don't think abortion would be an issue if Christians just adopted. If there was lines outside saying, please let me adopt that child. Please let me, please just let me adopt that child. If that was the problem, was that we didn't have enough adoptions available in this country, if that was the problem, I kind of think abortion would probably just be a moot point. I think it would go away. It might still be an issue, but that kind of goes to the point of, what are we going to do? How are we going to live? Bonhoeffer lived out the faith. He absolutely, under the harshest conditions, lived out the faith, and I love that. I want to see more of that. I want to see more of that in me. I don't know that I do that nearly enough, and I feel like this like sense of I want to live out the faith. No matter where I am, no matter what I'm doing, I don't have to be a pastor to do that. I can be normal old sales guy selling commercial landscaping, right? And I can love Jesus and be okay with that. And that is my life. That's what I'm called to do. That's who we are called to be. So Dietrich Bonhoeffer is a huge fan. I'm a huge fan of Dietrich Bonhoeffer. I mean, he has a book called Bonhoeffer. It's kind of fascinating, but he was even involved with a plot to assassinate Hitler. Did you know this?
No.
So hardcore Christian, right? I mean, this guy loved Jesus, and he was in a plot to try and assassinate Hitler.
Wow.
To end the war, and it failed. Didn't work out. But that's the kind of lengths that this man was willing to go to against injustice. And we could have all kinds of ethical conversations about whether it's right to assassinate one person, right? But I mean, that's like the lengths that he was willing to go in order to stop evil in the world. And he called it what it was. It was evil. And when no one else would, no other Christians would, no other denominations were doing it, he was the only one. And he probably had a small group, but it was really it's really a neat piece of history listening to Dietrich Bonhoeffer and his writings. But he wrote a whole book called The Cost of Discipleship, which is kind of outside of that little history. But he wrote a piece in there. Mike Van Meter talks a lot about it. In fact, he's the one who turned me on to Dietrich Bonhoeffer. But he talked about cheap grace versus costly grace. And he talked back then, right? This is, I don't know how many years ago. I can't do math. 80 years ago, 100 years ago, whatever it was. He talked about, not 100 years, but about 80 years ago, he talked about how the church has watered down faith and made it easy for people to come to faith. And he's like, but it's not an easy faith. It's a costly faith. It will cost you everything you have to follow Jesus Christ. Everything. And that is like not a message that preaches well, right? People don't want to hear that. They want to hear, how are you going to fix my life? How are you going to make things better for me? Dietrich Bonhoeffer was very much about the reality of what Jesus' life and what it's going to cost you to follow him. So I'm a big fan of him. But there's a lot of people that have similar stories. Bonhoeffer is just kind of more of a modern day, I mean, not really modern, but last century kind of a person that you can look to.
Yeah, I feel like I remember, I don't know what it was, what the context was, but I remember the moment that I sort of realized, like, when someone said, maybe it was even Mike, when someone says, that your faith should cost you something and that you should be sacrificing something in your life. I was like, oh, that's like, because like you said, it can be very easy for contemporary kind of gospel to just be all about you and what you gain and how much better your life is going to be and how you're going to feel and the things that are all going to be fixed in your life. And while those things are true, they might be a very siloed, kind of narrow view of the truth and reality of the whole, sure, of all of it. And I think that, it's a really sobering thought. Like, does my faith cost me anything right now?
Yeah, and I think that's a good. That is a good commentary on the United States of America, the church in the U.S.
Yeah.
I just think about it for a second. What part of our faith costs us anything? And if it does, you get to choose what it is. I'm going to choose to give up 3 hours of my time to go do a youth venture shift. I'm going to choose to, right? And in Bonhoeffer's, in his life, it was a choice for him to take the stance that he did, but it was life circumstances. The Third Reich, Hitler, Nazis, right?
That's crazy.
This is like a whole movement that was against him and his position. But I think we're seeing more and more of that. I think, in our culture, we're going to have more and more Christians are going to have to decide, am I going to actually follow Jesus? Am I really going to follow him? Because it's really not popular right now.
Yeah.
So it is what it is. Are you going to follow Jesus or not?
Yeah. Well, I think it's good too, right? In a sense, because
I think so.
I think about a lot of times, and this is also an idea that Mike sort of turned me on to and introduced in Micah 6:8 when I was going through the discipleship program at Foothills, which is sort of like a after high school discipleship program. And he was talking about how there's so many different, like the place that we are right now in time and in history and the places that we live and just being in the United States. Like, think about the context of you as a Christian here now, and think about how different it's going to be in 100 years and 200 years and 1,000 years, how different it was 100 years ago, 200 years ago, 1,000 years ago. And then, think about all the seasons and kind of the fluctuations and how he explained it, how it's sort of like a tide rolling in and out, but over time the tide keeps coming in farther and farther and farther until God's grace and his kingdom just overcomes the world and he comes back to establish his kingdom and
I love that is the overwhelming victory of Jesus Christ.
Yeah.
And I agree with that. I think that there's the tide is rising for the kingdom of God, and that doesn't mean the tide is rising for America. Doesn't mean the tide is rising for any particular people group. It's what Jesus is doing in the world. That's what matters.
Yeah. And also, like, you think about right now, and a lot of people would say, well, is America a Christian nation anymore? And there's all sorts of questions, like you said, where it's going to get harder for someone to, maybe they need to reassess, like, well, am I really going to be a Christian, or is this going to cost me something? And that's great because, maybe in the last 20 years or 30 years or 50, I don't know, however long the time period is, maybe it's been too easy, and maybe there are too many sort of surface level Christians, quote unquote, that maybe need to be challenged. Yeah. And this is God's will. This is his will for us as a nation and as a people, that we would be challenged and to grow in our faith and go for the next, kind of the next tide up and the next kind of swell for his kingdom.
Yeah. A guy named St. Augustine wrote a book called The City of God, and it was right during the fall of the Roman Empire. And it was massively shaking for everybody, right? The Roman Empire ruled the world, literally. There was no civilization beside the Roman Empire. And, that's a little bit ethnocentric, and some of my sociology friends will probably be mad at me, but that's basic. They were the dominant superpower of the world.
Yeah.
And they were crumbling, right? And they're falling. And some of St. Augustine's parishioners were coming to him saying, hey, the world's falling apart. What are we supposed to do? And he basically was talking about the kingdom of God. We don't live primarily in a country. That is not our security, right? The security is we live in the city of God. It's the building not made with human hands, right? And that is the Christian perspective on the world, is that I love my country, and I want to impact my community and my country as much as I can. And in fact, we're responsible for it. In fact, I challenge you to think like this, and it may not happen for you till you have children. But the only thing that matters is what my kids are going to live with, and really what my grandkids are going to live with. Right? That's what matters. What I have to deal with is pretty minimally important. But what my kids are going to have to deal with, that's on me. That is my responsibility. And I have a say in how life goes for my grandkids and my great-grandkids and my great-great-grandkids. That is, I have a vision for that, right? It used to be called posterity. And that's something that people used to talk about a lot. We don't talk about very much anymore because it's all about me and what I can get from me. But I encourage you to think about that. What is life going to look like for your kids?
Yeah.
Right? And for that next generation that's coming after you, that's really what matters. So, and that you take that in whichever way you want to. Your faith, Christianity, how we've impacted the world, our politics and the way that our country is run and how, that stuff's all on me. It's all on us. It's my responsibility. It's your responsibility. It's not their responsibility. It's not somebody else's problem. It's my problem. If my neighborhood doesn't know Jesus, that's not Foothill's problem or the church down the road's problem, right? That's my problem. Personally, I have a personal responsibility for what is happening in my environment.
Yeah. No, that's good. You want to start moving into maybe some of the wrap-up questions?
Yeah, Corey put down a good question I wanted to ask. He said, and it's kind of along the lines of planning, but he said, what is something that you have changed your mind about recently in the past few months or the past few years?
Changed my mind about.
That was a good question.
Yeah, the reason why I ask is I feel like growing up and as a young adult, like there are a lot of things that I've been wrong about and that we're all wrong about. But also like just other things that I've realized, that you think like I used to be very staunch about this and now I'm kind of lax. Or maybe I used to be really lax about this, now I'm really staunch. Or maybe it's, I don't know, just something that you've learned and now that you have a really strong stance on. I feel like I'm centering around like stances on something, but in general, just is there something or what is it that you changed your mind about recently?
I don't change my mind very often.
I thought you're flexible.
No, I it's a good question. I hadn't really thought about it. I think, okay, I got an idea. So as a pastor, and now I'm not a pastor, right, in role and position, I think that I had accidentally developed this idea that I'm doing the real work of God, right? Everybody else is like not. I don't know.
Or not
it's
as much.
Terrible thing to say out loud. It's absolutely terrible thing to say out loud. But I think that I accidentally picked up that idea, right? And that somehow the work that I'm doing is more important or more valuable. And then I'm not a pastor, right? I'm working at LeBron's Landscaping as a employee. And so then I'm starting to face this like I'm not doing important work feeling, right? And which is a lie. It's just an absolute lie. I'll just call that what it is. Well, then I read this book called Gospel Patrons. Radically changed my mindset. So that's I would say that's a big one that I changed my mind on, was this idea that the working person, right? We'll call them the funders, right? The ones that are funding ministry. They're funding the church or funding pastors or funding ministries or whatever. The working people are equally important in advancing the gospel as that person that's preaching the gospel, right? Equally as important. Not like kind of as important or... So for me to read that was like mind-blowing. And I didn't even realize... You might be thinking, it's crazy you ever thought that way. But to really understand the role and the value of that person that can give from their resources in order to fund the furthering of the gospel of Jesus Christ as equally as important. And great example is Paul. He partnered with Aquila and Priscilla, right? When he came into wherever, Ephesus, I think it was. And he meets up with them. It was interesting because I think it was Aquila who actually had to instruct Paul it's like this one line, right? Paul was unaware about X thing. Aquila had to fill him in on what Jesus had done or what this thing was. And from there exploded this ministry. And these guys Paul lived with them. These guys basically took care of him and helped him get to where he needed to go. And that was just mind-blowing to me. It was like, he's the guy, man. He's the one that's doing all the work. But there's these people that he meets up with who give him a place to stay, who give him a platform, who invite people over, who help create this environment where Paul is able to thrive. And I think that is just a critical part of faith, is that, man, I have the privilege of funding Youth Venture. I have the privilege of helping fund missions work all over the world. I have the privilege of helping, whatever, people to do what they do, right? I get to pay tithes to my church, and I get to watch what the gospel's doing in our church and participate in that. It's really, really neat. So that's been a pretty big mind shift, I guess, for me, is, that those people who donate are equally as important as the ones who are actually proclaiming the gospel, the mouthpieces.
Yeah. No, that's good. Thanks for sharing that.
Yeah, sure, no problem.
I'll drop you with one last bomb. If you can go back to 18-year-old Nathan and sit down and have a heart-to-heart, what would you tell him? What advice would you give him? If you could basically just give your little spiel, what would you say? Stop being an idiot. There you go. That's it. That's all you got for him. Yeah. What would that do for Nathan? I'd say, you're probably not going to listen to me, but if you will, I encourage you to not go into debt ever. I encourage you to get serious about listening to spiritual fathers in your life now. Don't wait. Submit your heart to people that are older and wiser than you. What else would I say? I'd probably say your worth is not in what you do. Your worth is in Jesus, and he gave that to you as a gift. So you don't have to work so hard to get God's love or favor or whatever. Yeah, no, that's good. You mentioned a few already.
Wait, one more thing.
Okay, go ahead.
Stop lying, stupid. Okay, go ahead.
And never lie to your wife. You mentioned a couple, Bonhoeffer, The City of God. Was it Patrons of God, right, is another book. Gospel Patrons. Great book. Any other books that you love or would recommend that you would gift to someone else? The Insanity of God. That is a paradigm-shifting book. I recommend The Insanity of God. Gosh, I probably have dozens more, but I can't think of them. I should have come prepared. I could email you or put a comment on your website somewhere. Here's some more books I recommend. But I got a whole library of them that I really like. I think, if you're young man, I think Wild at Heart is a great book. I think that's a good... Yes, that's a must. That's a big foundation for this podcast. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that Wild at Heart is a fantastic book for men. I think if you can read biographies or autobiographies, you should. I think you can learn. Dave Hoffman has actually said this before. He had some of his best mentors were found in books, right? People he couldn't actually sit down with directly, but they wrote a book, so read the book. I think that's, if you can read autobiographies or biographies, anything by Eric Metaxas, read his stuff. Eric Metaxas is incredible. He's written all kinds of biographies that are just really, really good. Yeah, that's great. And you can find all these books. We're going to have them on our favorites page. So cultivateandkeep.com/favorites. We'll get those on there. So thanks for the suggestions. Who do you look up to personally? This could be close people, also people you admire from afar, authors. Who do you look up to? Sure. Well, I was actually reflecting recently. I feel like I've had a lot of men in my life who've poured into my life, and I'm really, really grateful for that. I think I've had a lot of spiritual fathers. And I look up to Mark Hoffman. He's probably my primary guy. I look up to a guy like Bill Wilson. I grew up listening to him, and I feel like what he's done and how he chooses to live his life is really, really inspiring. From afar, I'm trying to think of the podcast I listened to and some of those guys. I listened to a couple people. Give me a sec.
You know, I really look up to your dad, Mike. I think that he has a lot of great wisdom and I think he has a lot of good impact. Or good input. I mean, I think that especially considering the life that he came from, especially considering his childhood and the way that his father treated him, the kind of father that he's been, versus what he experienced personally, I think is pretty mind blowing when you think about it that way. So I look up to him. I love that your dad has given away a ton of money, and I hope that I get to be as generous or more than he was. I love that kind of. So I look up to people that are generous. I look up to people that take stands and are willing to be upfront about things and real about things. So Mark Hoffman's probably my number one mentor or person I look up to in my life. My grandfather was a huge influence in my life. He died, sadly. He lived a good life. He's in heaven. But I really, really looked up to him. I think that he really impacted my life. So those are just a few of the people.
Yeah, that's great.
Probably have a whole list. Like I said, I'm going to send an email and say, I should have said this, but
Cool.
This is what it is.
We'll include it.
Okay, perfect.
Maybe not. We'll see.
Depends on if it's good or not.
It'll be good, I hope. What do you look forward to in the future?
Oh, man, I look forward to a lot of things. I think that I'm a forward-thinking person. I have a really hard time being in the present, actually, so I'm always thinking about what's going to happen. Looking forward to getting a new house. I hope that one day we get a new house. I'm looking forward to growing in impact in my local and state government. Big picture stuff, I look forward to seeing revival in the state of California. I want to see just a massive outbreak of people following Jesus. And I don't mean like flocking to church necessarily, even though I would love that. I think that should happen. But I mean people just getting on fire for Christ. And I really pray for revival, and I'm hopeful for that. So I look forward to the day when that happens. I look forward to growing old with my wife. She hates it when I say that, but I really am looking forward to that. I'm looking forward to our kids growing up and watching them live their life. And God, I hope we do a good job. It's like a major prayer, like, Jesus, help me. But I want my kids to grow up and be successful and do well. And I look forward to grandkids. I look forward to all kinds of stuff. So, yeah, that's an easy one for me. Being a millionaire, winning the lottery, I look forward to. Just kidding.
If you could say one thing to the next generation of Christian men, what would it be? Only one.
It's not about you.
I like hearing that.
It's not about you. Well, I mean, I could follow that up with, you're not that unique. Stop thinking that you're special. Do something. Like, live a good life. But you're not that special. You are a normal person. The only unique characteristic about you is that Jesus has bought you. That's it. Everything else, nothing new under the sun, nothing special. So do something. Do something special. Do something unique. Right? You're not special just because of who you are. It's just like you are a person made in Christ's image. That is what makes you special, I guess, to God. But in general, you're not that special. You're not that unique. You're just a person. But do something. Do something unique. Do something special. Create something. Do something.
Yeah. No, I love it. I think that's a good contrast to a lot of what we hear today. And there's a fun dichotomy of, God intimately crafts us and creates us and has plans for us and created each of us unique, but also don't think too much of yourself. And also we're all in a sense a cog in God's kingdom and accomplishing his will. And there's nothing, like you said, super, don't think too much of yourself.
Yeah.
Essentially is what it is.
You're made unique. There's no two people alike.
Yeah.
There's no question about that. But that just means that you're the only you, right? I mean, do something with it. Do something with your life.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know what that is, what that looks like. Just do something. You want to be special. You want to be called out. You need to do something with that. It's not just because of who you are, right? I think the only thing that is that you're special to God who created you. He looks at you and says, "You're mine. You're my son," and that makes you something to him. But you're just a person, so do something. Do something with it. I mean, be somebody, right? I mean, in fact, that uniqueness speaks to the uniqueness of your opportunity to do something, to create something, to change something. I mean, what is it? I mean, otherwise we just live and die. I mean, think about what's your grandpa's name, Jeremy?
Don't know.
What's your great grandpa's name?
Don't know.
I mean, I remember
Scary.
my great grandpa Breck. Sadly, I do not remember his wife's name. I'm really disappointed in myself by that. But I didn't know them, and that's 2 generations ago. 2 generations. Think about that.
I know.
Yeah.
No one is going to remember your name in 2 generations.
Super weird.
Right? Your kids are barely going to remember. Or your kids will. That's terrible.
Hopefully.
I hope my kids remember me. But your great grandkids are probably not going to remember your name. And so, what are we doing right now that is going to create an impact and create right? I mean, it's like Winston Churchill. Why do you know that name? For one reason and one reason only, he defeated Hitler. It's the one reason. It's like the biggest. I mean, that's like top of his game. And I guarantee you, in 100 years, we may or may not remember him.
Yeah.
He may not be important.
That's
I don't know.
a weird thought. Yeah.
I mean, really, he may or may not be remembered in 100 years from now. I don't know. But that is the frailty of life. That's the futility of this life.
Yeah.
And Francis Chan and Mike Van Meter reminded of us. We live on this 1-inch period of time on this never-ending infinite rope, right? And we think this is what matters. Forget it. We don't think about the unlimited never-ending rope that is eternity.
Right.
Live for eternity. Don't live for right now. You'd be surprised at the kind of impact you can have.
Perfect. Well, Nathan, it's been a pleasure. Thank you for taking a night out of your week to spend with us instead of your wife and children, or working on other things that I'm sure that you have other things to work on. It's been a pleasure.
I don't have anywhere to be. So thank you.
Didn't your wife say as soon as possible?
Yeah, she's already sent me a text saying, ETA, when are you coming home? I say, as soon as I can, sweetheart. Jeremy really needs this right now. This is really for Jeremy.
Yes.
I'm really encouraging Jeremy and helping
Good
him
strategy.
right now. Yeah.
Yes.
Good. Well done.
No, I really appreciate it, guys. I really am honored. And if this is completely terrible and you hate it, please don't use it.
Stop
I
it. What are
promise
talking
you.
about?
Do not use this if it's trash.
Well, we need the episodes, so.
Yeah, you need the episodes. Well, I mean, when you
by
get
default, you made the cut.
yeah, well, I mean, I'll get down to the bottom once you get LT,
Yes.
right? And you get Tim Tebow.
They're coming.
This is the peak of your fame on Cultivate and Keep. Just
Hey, that's fine with me. Just I want to get hashtagged next to Tim Tebow.
That's right.
There we go.
Both of them in there.
yeah.
I don't even who's Tim Tebow. He's a Christian football player, right?
Are you serious? You don't know who Tim Tebow is?
He like Christian football player. That's all I know.
Yeah. Well,
He's the guy that like
Previous-
praise and
Yeah. He
everyone
nails.
hated him for it for some
Yeah,
reason.
yeah.
Yeah.
It costed him
God
his
forbid
NFL
you're
career.
God forbid you're ever a Christian. It's a different life. I tell you what, man. I know we're wrapping things up, but it is quickly the positions of a Christian are not popular, and there's a real decision that has to be made. Am I going to live for Jesus, or am I not? And that doesn't mean you're always speaking up. And I've had to learn how to bite my tongue. Right, more often than not, I shouldn't say anything. I need to live differently. That's really what needs to happen. But it is not popular to have certain positions on things, like abortion and other hot topic issues no one wants to talk about.
Yeah. No, it's very true.
I like debate, by the way. So if you ever want to have a public debate,
Oof.
that might be kind of a fun podcast. If you have like super crazy right person over here, and then you have like super crazy left person over there, and then we have a discussion about
That'd be
something.
fun.
That is a
Yeah.
really fun idea.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that could be.
We'll have Spencer
Incendiary.
George on here.
I was just going to say, Spencer, you want to
George.
debate Nathan? He's been hanging with us.
That would be. I would really, really enjoy that. I would enjoy that.
Yeah.
He's
Well,
in here right now. I'm just
Hi, Spencer.
watching.
He just gave
claim to fame.
a symbol with his fingers. I don't know if you want to know what it was.
It was a peace sign. Okay.
Well, Nathan, if you have anyone that you would like to debate, tell them that this is the place to do it. We invite you and your friend or enemy, whoever they are to you, back
I don't have
to
enemies.
debate.
I have people who don't
I know,
agree
I'm
with
just
me yet.
kidding. We would welcome that to the podcast.
Well, I'm trying to think. This would be a podcast for young men trying to be like Christian men, right? So
Yes.
I'll have to think through that. Who
Okay.
we want to have on here to? I don't know. All men should be women. Okay, let's have a discussion about that.
That'd be good. Well, Nathan, once again, thank you. Appreciate your time.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah.
It's been great.
Yep.
Cool. Well, until
All
the
right.
next one.
Peace and love.